So today we're going to dive into a different kind of World War II battle. This isn't about a single battlefield. It's about the Nazi propaganda machine going head-to-head with the unbelievable industrial power of the Allies. It's this epic clash, right? A war of perception versus production. And it really asks the question, can a powerful story actually beat overwhelming physical reality?
And look, to really wrap our heads around this, we've got to get inside the mind of the man who built that whole Nazi narrative, Joseph Goebbels. And probably the best way to do that is to look at what people have said about his private diaries.
All right, so first up, let's take a closer look at Goebbels himself and the meticulously crafted world of lies he built around an entire nation.
So here's the deal with Goebbels. His job as the Minister of Propaganda was basically to control what an entire country thought, saw, and heard. And I mean everything. One of his very first acts, huge public book burnings. From that moment on, he had his hands on every newspaper, every radio station, and every film made in Germany.
And this gets to the absolute core of his strategy, the big lie.
It's this wild idea. If you tell a lie that's just massive, so completely audacious, and you just keep repeating it over and over and over again, people will eventually come to believe it. It's basically about creating an entirely alternate reality through nothing more than sheer relentless repetition. His playbook was pretty simple, but it was terrifyingly effective. He grabbed control of all of the media, buried any truths that made the regime look bad, and would spin these total military disasters into stories of, heroic sacrifice. And at the very heart of it all, with a chilling and somber consistency, was a relentless campaign to blame Jewish people for every single one of Germany's problems. And the result of all this, well, it's just this staggering level of self-delusion. Goebbels and the Nazi leadership weren't just selling this story, they were buying it themselves. His diaries are just filled with this over-the-top, fawning praise for Hitler. And as this reviewer hilariously puts it, the guy was the original fanboy. Okay, but here's the thing. This propaganda wasn't just built on thin air. To make it really stick, they built it on this really twisted Pseudo-Scientific Foundation. Something that was designed to sound, smart and rational. Right, so the Nazis were clever about this. They didn't just shout hateful things. They dressed it all up in the language of science. They took things like genetics and anthropology and just completely twisted them to make their hatred seem like an objective fact, not just some political idea. So at the very heart of this worldview was this rigid ladder of races idea. They drew from thinkers who divided all of humanity into categories like the people of the day, that's Europeans at the top, and the people of the night, that's Africans and others at the bottom. The core belief was that racial purity was everything, and any mixing between these groups would cause the whole civilization to just crumble. And this is where they really weaponized fear. Books like this one, The Passing of the Great Race, which was actually found in Hitler's personal library, it pushed this terrifying idea that the superior Nordic race was on the verge of being wiped out. It created this sense of panic, right? This feeling that they had to do something drastic, something violent, just to survive. Okay, so while the entire Nazi leadership is sinking in this ideological quicksand, a totally different reality is exploding into life across the ocean. A reality built on assembly lines, not theories. And man, talk about a pivot. America was turning itself into what President Roosevelt famously called the arsenal of democracy. Posters just like this one were everywhere, driving home this message of total unified effort. The entire country, from its biggest corporations down to its smallest towns, was being rewired for one single thing: production. This whole thing became known as the production miracle. And honestly, it's not hard to see why. I mean, you have the United States still crawling out of the Great Depression, and it just transforms, almost overnight, into the world's biggest industrial powerhouse, outproducing, pretty much everyone. And you can see that miracle in action right here. Car companies like Chrysler and Ford, they just stopped making cars. Instead, factories like the Detroit Arsenal were just pumping out M4 Sherman tanks. And get this, at the massive Willow Run plant in Michigan, they were rolling a new B-24 bomber off the line almost every single hour. Just think about that. The scale was something the world had never, ever seen before. And this wasn't just about huge factories. This effort reached into every single corner of American life. I mean, right down to high schools. This yearbook page from 44, it shows student clubs for collecting scrap paper and grease, things that were actually vital for the war.
Literally everyone was part of the machine. All right, so this is it. This sets up the ultimate collision course. What in the world happens when a complete fantasy, built on propaganda, smashes head-on into the hard, cold, undeniable reality of industrial war? Well, for Goebbels, reality started to hit from the sky. If you go back to his diary, a new theme starts popping up all the time. He's constantly complaining, bemoaning the Allied bombing raids that are just hammering German cities. He's writing about the destruction, and you can feel his frustration that they can't really strike back. That physical reality was starting to punch holes in his propaganda bubble. And here's the reality he was up against. Just take a second and really look at these numbers on the screen. Sure, German aircraft production is going up, but it is being absolutely dwarfed by the United States. In 1944 alone, the US cranked out over 96,000 planes. That's more than Germany and Japan put together. Those planes flying over Germany weren't a story he could spin. They were a mathematical fact. There was just no way they could keep up. But, and this is what's so wild, this is the real power of that self-delusion. Even with their cities getting flattened and these numbers staring them in the face, the Nazi leadership, just like this reviewer says, kept up this absurd degree of optimism. They were so deep in their own lies about destiny and racial superiority that they literally could not see the writing on the wall. And this number right here, just perfectly captures that final disconnect. 41 billion. That's how many bullets the US produced. So while one side was clinging to this faith in an idea, the other was busy manufacturing a physical reality so massive, so completely overwhelming, that no amount of propaganda could ever wish it away. So in the end, what happened here offers us a really powerful and honestly a deeply unsettling lesson from history. You know, reading through Goebbels' diaries today isn't just a history lesson. It is, as this reviewer points out, a warning. It's a terrifying case study of how a government with total control over information can drive a nation to do horrific things and create a bubble of delusion that leads to its own ruin. Look, in the end, the war proved that no matter how big the lie is, reality usually wins. But the story of the propaganda machine versus the production miracle, it leaves us with this one really crucial question to think about. What's the real cost of that final collision? And maybe more importantly, what does it take for us to see the truth before it's too late?